Hi there. In this episode, Music Gear Market, Hardware Samplers. Today we'll take a look at the used market for selected hardware samplers. I will be looking at a set of hardware samplers, discussing their specifications, the good, the bad, and most importantly, pricing. You'll get my opinion on what I believe is a good price, a bad price, and more. Let's do this. Here we are at our first sampler, and this list follows essentially the list that I did of samplers in July of 2024. I did talk about pricing there, but here we're going to actually look at the devices for sale on the web. We're going to start with the Ensoniq Mirage. There are several keyboard versions, and there's a rack mount version. I'm mostly interested in the red stripe keyboard version because it's the best keyboard version. As far as the rack mount version, if rack mount is what you want, then you can look at one of those too. Let's take a look down here and see what kind of prices we're looking at. You can usually find a couple of these that are in non-working condition, and you can see that there's a floppy drive emulator that you can put in these Mirage samplers. Here's one in Brooklyn, New York, another one here. Both of those are not working. This is really old tech. I wouldn't recommend buying one of the Mirages that isn't working. You're probably just buying somebody else's problems. This one's in good condition, but it's not a red stripe version, so it has the old Pratt Reed keyboard, and it's not as good. Let's see if we can find a red stripe. Here's our first red stripe. Excellent. $500, 85 shipping. It's in Denver, Colorado. Let's take a look. Not everybody's version of good condition is the same as ours, so let's take a look. Certainly some scuffs on here, and this is 40 years old, approximately. There's some dust on it here. You could probably get in this little groove here with some Windex or some cleaner and clean off some of this dust. It would probably look a little better. Silk screening on the back, a little bit scuffed. Just remember to read the description and make sure that the device is fully functional, especially the display here. This is the red stripe I'm talking about. It means it's the newer version. Don't have a lot of pictures here, but $500 is a decent price on a Mirage. For what you're getting, it's a terrible price as far as specifications. The number one sampler that I'm going to show you today is about this price or close to it. But people like the Mirage. They like the 8-bit sampling that the Mirage offers and just the nostalgia involved with the Mirage. See what else we've got. Here's another DSK-1. So this is a red stripe. The DSK-1 is the red stripe, and the 8 is the older version. On the red stripe, they put the disk drive in this location up here. Before, it was on the front of the keyboard, and the keyboard was elongated. Looks like you got some discs there. It's a little dusty here again. Very much like the synths episode I talked about, the Ensoniq ESQ1. It has a similar kind of case with a screw here and a screw here, and the same thing on the other end. These screws can rust in a moist environment, so you want to look and make sure those screws are in good shape, and they do appear to be in good shape here. There's some scuffing along this edge. The back panel looked pretty decent. This would probably be a decent option too, $595. They're not allowing you to make an offer. $190 for shipping is pretty high. Generally, you can ship a keyboard like this for about $120. But here's one in excellent condition. Let's take a look at this one. See what excellent condition. Well, for its age, I would call it good. It's got scuffing here, it's got scuffing here and here. Keys seem to be fine. There doesn't seem to be any rust on these screws. Get some discs with it. No other pictures. That's unfortunate. $600 is local pickup only, and it's in LA, so that's a choice. Very good red stripe here. We'll just take a look at one more. Got a little mark here. Hard to tell. That's some possible rust starting there, and certainly some deep scraping on the bottom. Got a manual. So there's the Mirage. The Korg DSS-1. Korg's only sampler until the Triton came along in the late 1990s. So this is the only sampler they put out in the 80s that I'm aware of. But $2,160 is way too much. It's in Armenia anyway. If we go down here, let's see what other prices we can find. There's floppy drive replacements for it. So here's one in Indiana. Let's take a peek. Looks like something was attached here. These look like adhesive Velcro. Certainly some scuffing on the front panel. Looks like it comes with some discs. Broken key. Yeah, we've got a broken key here. Let's skip this one. I just wouldn't buy something this old that you're going to have to take apart. Don't want to have to deal with that. Let's look at this one in West Babylon, New York. This looks in similar condition, maybe a little less scuffing overall. Keyboard looks clean here, all on the same level. Back panel looks pretty clean. It's a little dusty. It's got a few scrapes on it. Not totally unexpected for a device that's 40 years old. A little scuffing here. I wouldn't underestimate the value of having this silk screening here about parameters. That can be very helpful, so you don't have to keep referring to the manual. See if we can find something a little better. This one says excellent, $425. It's only an extra $25. Unfortunately, it's local pickup only, but if you lived in LA, let's take a look. Does look in pretty good condition. It says excellent. I would almost tend to agree. That looks like a pretty deep scrape here that might be all the way down to the metal. I don't think that's a reflection from any kind of flash or anything. $400 is about the going rate on these. Paying $2,000, $1,000, that's just really ridiculous. I would look at this area down here. There's quite a few to choose from. This one even has make offer, as does this one. Read the descriptions, make sure they're fully functional. So here's the Yamaha TX16W. I used to own one of these. If you use it with the Typhoon software, I hear it's pretty decent. The original operating system was programmed by a dyslexic hamster. Let's take a look down here at prices. $800 is ridiculous. I've seen them as cheap as $200, and maybe we'll get lucky today. $225, $100 shipping. Of course, that's in Poland, so that's not really going to help us. Here's one with the box. That looks pretty good. $300. Let's see if it's in excellent condition, which is what it says. That does look in excellent condition. Very clean. This is where you add the additional RAM. It comes with 1.5 megabytes, upgradable to 6 megabytes. You don't get SCSI on it, unfortunately. but you can get floppy drive replacements for this machine. So you could replace the floppy drive here. Very cool that it comes with the box. So I think this would be the one I would choose if I were looking for a TX16W. I don't think we need to go any further. Free shipping, and it's $300. That's very reasonable. They're even asking you to make an offer. At $300, it's a good deal, but you could offer them $250 and they would probably take it. Ensoniq EPS 16 Plus. There's kind of a cult following for Ensoniq keyboards out there. And this keyboard is no stranger to that following. $2,299 is just ridiculous. A fair price for this is about $500 for the base model, which would be an EPS 16 Plus. If it has a floppy drive replacement or any expansion, then it would be worth more. This one has the SCSI interface, but let's see if we can find one around about 500. Non-functioning. Here's one very good. It's in Illinois, $750, but it's got expanded memory, it's got an SD card reader, and a USB floppy. So this is nicely upgraded. So it's probably worth this additional price here if you're looking for this particular device, the EPS 16 Plus. It does look clean. The silk screening looks very nice here. This can crack as it gets older, and it can also get scratched and scuffed up. There's the memory expansion. There's the floppy drive replacement. You can see the SD card, and then there's USB. It's hard to tell what that is. It looks kind of like USB-C, but I'm not sure. I only get 3 pictures here, but yes, this is very clean. If you are interested in an EPS 16, this would be one to consider. It's upgraded with the drive and also with the memory expansion. The display looked fully functional and clean here. These fluoro displays are very nice from Ensoniq. They put it on a lot of their gear, the ESQ1, the SQ80. A lot of their devices have the fluoro display, and it's just very pretty and easy to read in dark environments. I don't think we need to go any further on this. Let's take a look. The FZ-1, this made quite a buzz because it was really not the first 16-bit sampler, but certainly the first mass-produced 16-bit sampler. Every other manufacturer, Roland, Yamaha, was producing, they were all producing 12-bit samplers. And so when the FZ-1 came out, it was a big deal, but not $1,300 big. This is probably worth about $500. One here, fair condition, $450. So that's about right. The big problem with these that I remember is the backlight would go out on the display, and they're very hard to read. It's got a very hard to read LCD display. Looks pretty clean. You got a scratch going on up here. It's unfortunate. Some more scratches here on the floppy. The display is rectangular. It's essentially a square. It would be nice if they had a picture with it on so we could, there it is. It is on. And this one, the backlight is out, and so it's very hard to read. I think you can buy backlight replacements. There might also be OLED display replacements. But do you really want to have to buy something and then start tearing it apart? Probably not. A little bit of scuffing there. Let's see if we can find one with a replaced display or one that's still working pretty well. We only have two others to look through, showing that all the keys are even, and you can't take that for granted. You got those 8 individual outs. Some pretty heavy scuffing up there, and on this side too, and on the edges and on the side. So the cosmetic condition isn't so great. How about a picture of the display? I guess that's too much to ask for. Okay. Let's try this one on the top. I just want to be able to show you a display that looks decent. Yeah, this one has a display that's... the backlight is still working, and that's a lot more clear, or that might be a replacement display. It's hard to tell. This one's certainly in a lot nicer cosmetic condition than the others, and it looks like it comes with a hard case there. However, I wouldn't pay $1,353. It's a decent sampler, but that's just way too much for this sampler. $500 is about the right price if you're interested. So maybe this one right here. Let's move on. The Akai S900. Everywhere I went in Miami, when I moved there in 1986, I found Akai S900s at the studios that I went to. And $1,500 is way too much. About $350 to $500 is a good price for these. Here's one for $550. $559. Let's see, this is in Pennsylvania. They want you to make an offer. They're only providing one picture, so that's not a lot of help. Got some tape residue up here. The front panel looks pretty decent. These knobs here can break, and they just degrade over time, and it looks like this one might be missing. Power's on, and most of the knobs and the buttons are intact. Most, but not all, I'm guessing is what they mean. Haven't done any testing apart from powering it on. Okay, well, you could be getting a great deal, or you could be getting a 10-pound paperweight. I wouldn't risk it. This one looks dirty. They could have cleaned it up a little bit. But I think most of this is probably surface dirt. Looks like we got some small dents in here, probably from taking it in and out of a rack. That's a little disturbing. That's kind of brownish. I would say that could be some water damage on that disc. Hopefully it's not indicative of the actual machine itself. The knobs seem to be the original knobs, and they seem to be intact. This has got some scuffing on the edge. This is water damage, or at least it looks like water damage. It could be that the discs were stored in a damp place, and perhaps the machine wasn't. Some bad scuffing up here. But at this point, I would just close this out, and I would look for something a little better if I was really looking for an S900. Very good condition. Let's take a look at this. Where does it say it's at? Heathrow, Florida. I didn't know there was a Heathrow, Florida. It's missing the rack ears. I can tell that right away. It's got a floppy drive replacement. That's handy, but it's not perfectly sized, so dust has been getting in here. Other than that, it's fairly clean. Looks like that might be a replacement knob. It is two concentric knobs, but hard to tell. It's fairly clean. Doesn't have any expansion. I would say this would be an interesting purchase for somebody, providing you don't want to rack mount it, or you have a shelf you can rack mount it on, because it doesn't have the ears. I'm not sure how hard it would be to source those. Might be easy, it might be impossible. Let's see what else we've got. Maybe we've got some other choice here. Original box and manual. Here's one in Atlanta, Georgia. Let's take a look at this one. Okay, this has got a USB thumb drive in it. This front panel is very clean, but it does look like it's missing the rack ears again. Yeah, it's definitely missing the rack ears. So that's going to be if that's a problem for you, you'd want to avoid this. Okay, and now we're into the expensive stuff that I just don't think is worth it. Let's move on. Roland S-550. I used to own 2 of these, and the good thing about the S550 is it has an optional SCSI card, but you can also put a floppy drive replacement on it and run it with an SD card or a thumb drive. You can use a mouse with it, which is really nice, and a monitor. It also has a mix out and 8 individual outs. Let's see what kind of prices are we looking at. So we're looking at $100 for a floppy drive replacement that includes an OLED screen, which is kind of nice. Just the mouse alone is $209. Let's take a look at this. $436. Looks pretty clean. No floppy drive replacement on it. It's this panel here that you remove to install the HDIF interface, the hard drive interface. The chances of finding those now are probably next to 0. One of the units that I had installed the SCSI drive on. Also, this is a Japanese unit. Always look at this. If you're seeing these Japanese characters, plus it's 100 volts. Fine if you live in a country that uses 100 volts, but not really good for the US. It says West Babylon, New York, but this was probably some kind of gray market device, or somebody just purchased one from Japan. Wouldn't be my choice. As far as $775, I just wouldn't even look at something like that. We'll look at it just for completeness, but in this kind of price category, you're looking at, you might as well just buy a 760, which is a 16-bit sampler, whereas the S550 is only a 12-bit sampler. It's got some heavy-duty rack rash, and this has seen some wear and tear in its life. It does have a mouse, which is nice, and I see there's a monitor up here. I don't know if the monitor and the mouse are included. We can take a look at the description. It does have a floppy drive replacement, so it would be somewhat of a workhorse from that perspective, but it only has 1.5 megabytes of RAM. And it's a color monitor, which is nice. It's probably using a SCART plug, and you can buy those on Amazon. Yep, it's using SCART. See what else we can see here. It's got a nice OLED screen on the floppy drive replacement, which is really nice. There's the SCART interface. And there it's coming out of the RGB. I think that's mostly dust and just grime, and that would probably wipe off, but it's not in the best of condition. So what I've seen about Roland S550s is that they have gone up in price. I gave one of them to a friend of mine, and he sold it for $50. I sold the other one myself for about $400, and it had the SCSI interface on it, and I sold it with the mouse and the full 120 discs that I had with it. $775 isn't a bad value if it includes the monitor, the interface, and the mouse. You'd have to read all this, and I don't want this video to be too long, but you could do that. Let's move along. Yamaha A5000. You don't see many of these because they didn't sell very well. They came out in circa 1999, 2000, which is when 2 other big sampler brands released their monster samplers, and they are on this list, and we'll get to them. And those samplers essentially crushed the A5000. This is a pretty good sampler. A lot of people did like it, and the A4000 is its baby brother, and it's pretty good too. Let's take a look at it. The screen isn't bad. It's a fairly large screen, but not as big and as useful as the screens on the two monster samplers I'm going to show you in just a moment. Front panel looks pretty good, just some minor rack rash. It's got a zip drive replacement installed in here. That's going to be pretty nice. It's a Zip 100, so that'll be a 100 megabyte zip disk that you can put in there. It's got a big gash down the side. It looks like something metal hit this and slid down it. That's unfortunate. You're going to get to see the back panel. Got a manual. Nope, we're just going around in circles here. $585, $140 shipping, and it's in Poland. The problem is they didn't sell many of these in the US. This was Yamaha's big foray back into sampling after the TX16W, which didn't go over very well. But they'd come out with the series of the A5000 and the A4000. And these were their kind of last hurrah of big monster samplers. Next up, Roland S-760. And this would be a good consideration rather than, say, the Roland S-550. This is 16-bit instead of 12-bit. It does have SCSI on it as standard. The optical card that you can install in the back of the unit allows you to use a mouse and a monitor, but that is an option, and you have to find it on a unit. The big problem is you'll often see a whole bunch of these for sale from a company, and you can see this Techno Empire folks. These folks have a lot of these for sale. Let's take a look at one of them. The displays are prone to failing on these. First of all, it's one just line of dots, and then eventually it's several lines of dots, and they may not be consecutive. And eventually it looks kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, and it's hard to read what's on the screen. It looks very clean. It's got the SCSI, it's got MIDI in and an out combo through. It's got the stereo input here, and it's got 4 audio outputs. You also get digital output over here with this optical card that goes in, and you also get mouse control and a monitor output that you can run to a color monitor, which would be very nice. Yeah, see, this is typical. There's some lines missing on the text. Hopefully there's there's no other pictures of the screen. If we could see other words up here, there could be lines missing in those too. Because you notice how they're missing here in these words, but it's not actually interfering with this line that's going all the way around. So there could be many other lines that are missing. This looks like 2 consecutive lines of dots. That's why it's so cheap. See if we can find one in better shape. Now, I think a reasonable price for one of these samplers is about $400, and maybe $350, and then closer to $500 if it has the optical card in it. This one looks clean. Very clean. Tiny bit of rack rash. Doesn't have the optical card in it. It does have SCSI on it, so you can attach a zip drive to it and use 100 megabyte discs if you wish. Let's see if that most expensive one has the optical card. It's $500. It's a little dirty on the front. Not sure if that's dust or if that's something to do with the finish. No optical card. It's getting harder to find them with the optical card. 10 years ago, there would be lots online. You could find plenty with the optical card installed, and they were a lot less expensive. You could find them with the optical card for about $250. Let's move on. The EMU 6400 series, and this is the Ultra. This is one of the two that I would recommend. For the price, these are excellent samplers. A good price on one of these is about $500, and that's kind of where we're at. This person says excellent, and they're in Maryland, so let's take a look at this one. It's got a nice bright screen. It's got a SCSI port, and this is a really old type of SCSI port, but you can still find devices that will interconnect with this, and you may be able to find some adapters on Amazon if you need them. It's got the additional card here. There's a card that goes in and gives you word clock and additional in, out, and through on MIDI, gives you the ASCII keyboard, and this is a very old format of keyboard that you have to find that was used on PCs 25 years ago. And then you get digital in and out on XLR, AES, EBU. And then this is the standard MIDI in and out and through. It's called MIDI A, and this is MIDI B. And then you have your audio outs here and in as well for sampling. You've got a fan on it, and it does make some noise, so just be aware of that. These are the expansion ports, but this one has not been expanded beyond the digital card and the additional MIDI ports. That's the version of the OS that it's using. These are nice samplers, very nice samplers. See what else we've got here. It's $584 with $50 shipping. Make an offer. I think if you offered them $475, they would probably take that. We've got another one here from Techno Empire. That's the place that had the S760s with the displays that weren't working. Looks like the drive has been replaced because it should be the same color as the other facing material. It's clean, doesn't have the digital card installed, does have SCSI, and it's just, this is essentially non-expanded. It is very clean, I'll say that for them. See what else we've got. I think there was one more. $600. And this one is not allowing you to make offers. See if it has been expanded. Doesn't have the digital card. Now there are expansions that go inside, like ROM sounds that came from something similar to the Proteus line. So there are things that we may not be seeing on the outside. There may be expansions on the inside. But I would say if you're looking to get into the EMU architecture or that environment, this would be a good option here, and I think you could probably make them an offer and do pretty well. Last but not least, we have two samplers that are closely related, and I'm going to start with the big monster sampler of them all. This would be my choice for you to buy if you're really looking to buy a hardware sampler. There's some others that aren't included here, like the Z8, which is from Akai, and a couple of others, but I truly believe this is one of the best hardware samplers that were ever made that were budget friendly. Obviously the Synclavier and the Fairlight are not included in that bunch. Let's take a look at this guy. It's got 64 voices, 256 megabytes of RAM, and that is the maximum RAM that you can have in this device. It doesn't have the ADAT card installed. It doesn't have the USB card installed. And there's no keyboard connected. But the S6000 and its baby brother, the S5000, do come with the keyboard port. All you have to do is plug a keyboard into it. It's just telling you it doesn't have one plugged in. It does have a floppy drive, and it looks like it has a hard drive inside the unit. The front face is detachable, and this is an additional drive that would be an option, and it allows you to put additional sounds on a card. The keyboard plugs into the side of this front-facing device, and hopefully we'll be able to see that, and I'll be able to show you. So the S6000 was mostly expanded. It was not completely expanded, but mostly expanded. Here we have XLR inputs and outputs. We have 16 individual outputs. We got digital out here. We got word clock in and out. We even have a SCSI terminator switch. We have 2 SCSI ports. We have 32 channels of MIDI, MIDI A and MIDI B, both having in, out, and through. That's very generous. Now, these 2 panels here allow for additional options, and one of them is a USB card, which can be very handy for transferring files to and from a computer. There's also some additional expansions that you can put actually right in the machine. This one looks in very nice shape. You can see right here it says ASCII keyboard, and there's a port right on the side of this front panel that is removable. I think the idea was that you put the rack mount device in your rack, and then you run a cable, probably longer than this one, to your desk, and then you have this on your desk, and then you can plug a keyboard into it. And that probably helps for typing in names when you're sampling and doing other functions. Screen looks good, looks very clean, no scratches, at least nothing heavy. Very clean, very clean. $831. Now you are paying for that additional card reader that is installed. See if it talks about it down here. It is upgradable to 128 voices, and it has 64. I think 64 is probably fine. You're probably not going to find the upgrade cards anymore. They're long gone. Remember, this device came out in the year 1999, so that's 25 years ago. We only have one to choose from, which is unfortunate. But $831 is not bad, and you can make an offer. And this one's been up here for a while. I think probably $700, $650 is not an unreasonable offer price. Now the baby brother to this is this device here, the S5000. The idea behind the S5000 was it essentially is, or it can be, everything that an S6000 can be. But what you do is you buy this and then you upgrade it as your wallet allows. The only thing that really it doesn't have is that removable front panel. Let's take a look at the prices here. Let's resort this. Obviously, $2,375 is ridiculous. Let's go down here and see what we can find. So we'll forget about Poland for right now. This one says good condition, this one says very good, and it's only $40 more, and well, that's Austria. Let's see if we can find one that's US. Here we go. Excellent condition. It's in California, $600, $100 shipping, and you can make an offer. And this is a heavy unit, so $100 shipping is fairly reasonable. It looks like there might be some rust going on the top here. It's weird. I'm not exactly sure what that is. You could message the seller and ask them. But the front panel looks pretty clean. Since this isn't a detachable face, the ASCII keyboard plugs in over here. It's got 256 megabytes of RAM, so that's pretty cool. Keyboard's not plugged in, no ADAT card. Just would like to know what those are. I'm trying to figure out what they could be. It's weird. So it hasn't been expanded with the additional outs. The 6000 we were looking at had 16 individual outs. This one only has the 8, and then it doesn't have the XLR outs. It's also 1 rack space less in size. It does have AES EBU down here, optical, word clock, terminator. Still has 2 SCSI ports. This one does have the USB card installed. So that's interesting. Nice that it has that. And you get 32 channels of MIDI. I can see that some people might find this attractive, but for most studio applications now, it's unlikely you're going to be running the device multi-timbrally, but you might. So this is certainly a fairly attractive device. The 6000's a little better. This is a little bit more affordable, but you could probably get the 6000 closer to this price. Now, this one has been heavily upgraded, but now we're essentially at a price where it would be better to go for the 6000. See what we have here. Looks in pretty good shape. Has that Zulu hard drive installed. It's 1 terabyte, so you can put a lot of sounds on that. Showing you some of the sounds they have. This one has been expanded with the additional 8 ports. You can see them more clearly here. Doesn't have the USB card in it though. It does have SCSI on it. For the price, $850, personally, I would look at the 6000. There was a time when these were selling for about $350 and the 6000 was selling for about $500, but the prices are going up. If you're looking to buy a hardware sampler, this is one to consider. Just out of an abundance of curiosity, let's take a look at this one right here. This is in France. It's just ridiculously priced, $2,375. Let's see, maybe it's, made out of gold or something. I don't know. It's only got 1 picture, so that really doesn't help us. So the answer is no. All right. Time to return you to Jeffy to close out this episode. That's it for today's list. If there is music gear that you would like me to discuss in a future episode of Music Gear Market, let me know in the comments. Rest assured that I have a massive gear list that I plan to go through. I will be grouping gear in a logical manner, such as drum machines, audio interfaces, and other gear. From time to time, I may do a grab bag that will include a host of different gear in an episode. The plan, however, will be to group similar gear together so that you can compare and make good buying decisions. Hopefully I haven't wasted your time. Take care, and I'll be back in another episode soon.